Now I'm joined by a friend of the show, Mark Brnovich, former Arizona Attorney General. Mark, what is going on legally in America is continually in our news. We learned today that on October the 3rd, Hunter Biden will appear in a court in Delaware on firearms charges, getting a gun whilst he was still a drug user, drug addict. Seems to me that given some of the accusations that were made against Hunter Biden, these are relatively minor charges.
They are and they aren't. I mean, they're significant in the sense that he could face up to 10 years in prison for each of the firearms charges. And I know as a former federal prosecutor, the big thing they get you with, whether it's lying to the FBI or lying on these federal forms, I mean, that's a felony in the United States. And so it's funny because the left and the Democrats do everything they can to try to prevent people from owning guns in the United States. They want more gun restrictions, and they advocate more laws like this that punish people. And so now it's they're getting hoisted on their own petard, so to speak, because now these very same tough gun laws that they want will be used to prosecute the president's son.
It's taken a long time for Hunter Biden cases to come up, hasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. It's taken a long time. And I think that, you don't need a weatherman to know which way the wind blows. And the reality is that, Joe Biden has been trading on his influence for the last 50 years in Washington, D.C., and his family, like a bunch of Remoras living off of a shark, have kind of fed off of him. And that's what, Hunter Biden's essentially done. I mean, it's sad, but it's true. And you can just plainly see what's going on.
And yet Georgia was the opposite, because Georgia has moved at breakneck speed against Donald Trump. The trial's going to happen very, very quickly. How much trouble in Georgia is Trump in?
Well, it's always tough to predict what a jury or judge is going to do.
Of course, but potentially.
But this is the thing. I actually believe, once again, as a former state federal prosecutor, that I think they almost bit off too much. And because you have all these different prosecutions, like the New York prosecution, for example, where I think there's a legitimate statute of limitations issue. You're talking about a charge that had never been filed by a state prosecutor. And so they're coming up with all these new and novel theories. And I, as a prosecutor, was always taught, when you have the ability to take away someone's livelihood, life, liberty, property, it's an awesome responsibility. You don't just throw stuff against the wall and see what sticks. And so when you're talking about a former president and the major candidate, the number one threat to the current president of the United States, you don't come up with some novel new theory that's never been tried out before.
But you, as a prosecutor, were an elected prosecutor on a Republican ticket. And we're looking at this from this side of the pond. And we would accept that our legal system isn't perfect. But we have a separation of functions. Yeah. The Director of Public Prosecution's Office, interestingly, of course, Sir Keir Starmer had that job in times past. But we have a separation out from elected officials, who deal with passing legislation on criminal matters, repealing legislation. Our prosecutors are independent and seem to be independent. I just wonder, Mark Brnovich, I look at the divide in America, the political divide in America, which is, frankly, enormous. Far bigger than it's been in our lifetimes.
Yes, true.
Maybe the biggest it's been since about 1856 in many ways. And I wonder whether these just overt political prosecutions, because that's how they look, is it time America rethought its judicial system?
Well, look, I mean, there's always room for improvement. But the reality is that before I was an elected prosecutor, I worked at the Department of Justice, where you work for, in a career track. To me, part of the problem is that you have within the agencies of the United States government, whether it's the State Department, whether it's the Department of Defense, whether it's the Department of Justice, you have these career individuals who can't be fired. They aren't getting bar complaints. And so they're really unaccountable. And they essentially have become like a Praetorian Guard. And we saw this even with Donald Trump, when all his intelligence agency directors, more than 50 of them, said this was all Russia collusion. And they're all lying.
They did not believe the Hunter Biden tape.
Right. And so you literally now you have this situation where you have an old Praetorian Guard that thinks they're the keepers of the kingdom at the FBI, DOJ.
So basically, the unelected lot aren't working.
Yes.
The careerists aren't working, and the elected lot are acting very politically. Well, it's a mess.
It is a mess right now. And this is the thing that worries me as a prosecutor, is that what's happening is the institutions in America are being undermined and people aren't appreciating them as much. They don't value their credibility. And so when you have highly politicized prosecutions that seem very political in nature, people lose respect. And what's going to happen is, I worry, Nigel, this will start to cycle now, and then I think you're going to start seeing elected Republican district attorneys and attorneys general saying, well, you know what's good for the goose is good for the gander. And if they're going to attack our political appointments with novel theories.
It's a race to the bottom.
Right. It is a race to the bottom. And as a prosecutor, you have to understand your obligation is to do justice. It's not to win at every cost.
I know. Mark Brnovich, we'll talk to you again. 2024, going to be a huge year.